Welcome to the Why Not podcast with me, Chrissy Hawkins. In a world where everybody asks you why, I'm here to ask why not. So sit back and relax or walk and listen and join me on this journey as we try to answer this never-ending question: what makes people say, why not? Hi guys, welcome back to Why Not. So today I have an interview with Claire Feldman, who is a psychotherapist. I'm going to let Claire tell you a little bit more about herself. So welcome to the podcast, Claire. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you very much for having me on. My name is Claire. I've been working as a CBT therapist for around 10 years now, but in the last 4 years have really been specialising in disordered eating recovery. So I work primarily with women to help them who struggle with kind of emotional and binge eating.
Deadly. Okay, so how did you end up getting into psychotherapy in the first place?
Well, I used to do a very different career before. So I was in a former life, I was an HR manager for retail and just very much felt like a bit of a square peg in a round hole. Didn't feel like it was right for me. I guess I'd always had an interest in mental health. I had grown up in a home with a mother who had mental health issues, and I suppose it's of no coincidence then that quite often when we grow up in a home where there's been difficulties, that we want to be rescuers and we want to learn how to help. And I think it was that really that spurred me into training in cognitive behavioral therapy. I found that I really loved it. I loved that particular modality. And so started kind of doing voluntary work initially, and then moving into working within GP practices. Working with GP referrals, kind of primarily working with anxiety and depression.
Okay, and then what brought you to the disordered eating?
The disordered eating, it came about really because, well, initially I had thought that I wanted to help women to lose weight, and had kind of been thinking, actually, the mindset is the part of it that women really struggle with the most. That we all know about kind of calories or macros, but it's often the mindset and the self-sabotage that is the thing that can railroad us. So initially, when I had first started Eatology, that I was wanting to incorporate kind of nutrition advice alongside mindset work, challenging our unhelpful thoughts and our unhelpful habits and behaviors. What I guess realized quite quickly is when I started to work with women who really struggled with their weight, I could just see just how deeply ingrained their connection was to food, their emotional connection to food, and how disordered a lot of their eating was. And I kind of got to a point of feeling like it just didn't quite sit with me, the focus on trying to help people lose weight when there was such disordered eating issues there. It didn't really sit well with me. And so I kind of started exploring what else was out there. I came across then training, eating disorder specialism training, and did that. And it was that really kind of made me realize that actually not focusing on the weight loss, even though that's often what many people who come and see me are wanting to pursue, that actually resolving the issues around food, addressing the emotional eating, addressing the binge eating was what I felt really kind of drawn to and aligned to. Had my own kind of disordered eating history back in my late teens and early 20s. So it was something that I could really was familiar to me and that I could really connect with. So it was that training from the National Centre for Eating Disorders that really kind of cemented for me that I wanted to specialise in that area. And that's what I've been really doing for the last 4 years now.
Oh, brilliant. And when you had people who were, say, coming to you for weight loss and you were kind of working with the disordered eating, did you get a lot of pushback with that, or?
Yeah.
with
with pretty much every single client, there will always be this desire that on the one hand, they will either really want to lose weight or will be terrified of gaining weight. And then on the other hand, they really want to resolve the issues that food, and the hold that food has over them, and they really want to recover from the disordered eating. And what I will always kind of explain is that, like, right now, those two goals cannot coexist together.
Yeah.
We can't have a goal of weight loss, because a goal of weight loss is all really focused around restriction, calorie counting, tracking, and the goal of recovery is about letting all of that stuff go.
Yeah.
So the two just can't exist together. So there will always be that kind of pushback. And I tend to just ask clients, like, what feels more important? Does recovery feel more important, or the potential of some fluctuation or some change in weight? What feels more important? And, like, is it possible that the weight loss could even just be in a box and kind of put to the side for now? It's not that you can never ever bring it out again, or that you can never have that goal, but is it possible that it could go in the box for now and just be put to the side, and we focus on recovery? And that's generally what we'll do. And every so often the box will come out and we'll have a conversation, and then we try and just put that box to the side again. So yeah, it'll come up with every single client, but I have to stay very true to me and have integrity around what I do. So I will never ever promise or guarantee weight loss whenever I'm working with a client now.
Do they still come to you with weight loss, or are they coming for the eating disorders now?
Primarily, they'll be coming for the disordered eating. I will get some clients that will come to me, clients who are in much larger bodies, who are keen to lose weight, and again, it'll be it will be a kind of a similar conversation of, I can help you with your relationship with food. I can help you if there are issues around your emotional eating, and that's what we will focus on. Weight loss may well be a byproduct of what we do. It may well be a byproduct of what we do and of the changes that we make. But again, I don't make guarantees.
Yeah. Do you find that does kind of happen, like, oftentimes?
Yeah, it can happen. I think, particularly if a client is really engaging in a lot of binge eating, a lot of kind of destructive eating habits, that whenever they're able to overcome those issues, that there may be some weight release. What I do often find, however, is that it's maybe never as much as what the client would like.
Yeah.
Or what the client would hope for. It's generally not as much, because we can all hold that ideal, can't we? In our mind, of what we think our ideal weight might be. But particularly if a client has come to me and they have maybe had years of losing loads of weight, gaining loads of weight, losing loads of weight, that with clients like that there's so many factors probably that will come into play in terms of, like, what impact there has maybe been on their metabolism and what age they are now, that the ideal that they might have in their head about what weight they think that they would like to be at, or what would be at their ideal weight, just might actually be very, very different then from what their body
wants.
what the body wants. And that can be very different. Like the logical, the number in their mind might be very different from what the body wants and what the body is able to, given what the body has been through.
And do they struggle to come to terms with that kind of, or?
It can be very difficult to kind of to come to terms with that. But also, quite often when someone has worked with me and we've gone through that kind of journey, like, what they often discover is that they do feel so much better in themselves, their confidence, their self-esteem, that there are a lot of other improvements in areas of their life, regardless of what their weight is doing. And that's what we really we hope for, that somebody can get to the end of this process have a healthier relationship with food, or maybe engaging in more like health promoting behaviors, that they're engaging more in life, that they're, they're feeling much better within themselves, regardless of whether their weight is at the kind of that number, that figure that they have in their mind.
Is there somewhere, like, do you find with clients a lot of time that number they come up with, is there like a common theme where they get it from, like social media, or a weight they were at some point, or
the weight they wear at some point is probably like a really common one. So it might be like a weight they wear 5, 10, 15 years ago, a weight they were back before they had children, that they'll often kind of romanticize about like a specific weight perhaps that they wear at some point in their life. And again, we have to really look at the fact that, well, a lot of time has passed since then, and your life has changed, your stress levels are different, your priorities in life are different. So we kind of have a good conversation around that. And sometimes whenever people say, oh, I want to be this weight because like I was that weight before, and then when I'll ask, well, what were you doing to get to that weight? When you're at that body weight, what were you doing? And they'll be like, oh, I was eating 1,200 calories a day, I was working out 7 times a week, I was walking 20,000 steps a day, I was like on calorie controlled shakes. And I'm like, well, that's not going to be feasible, is it? Because what you were actually doing there was being so restrictive and over exercising to get to that weight. That's definitely not what your body naturally wants to be.
Yeah, I think is they forget all the stuff they did to be at that weight, don't they? They just see the pictures and go, didn't I look great?
Yeah, oh, I looked great there. But then maybe when they start to dig a little deeper, they might be like, well, I might have looked great, but actually I was really miserable. Yeah, I was really miserable, or I wasn't able to go out and socialize, or I was obsessed with food, or I was literally killing myself in the gym to get to that. And if you feel like you're killing yourself to get to a specific weight or try and maintain a certain weight, that's definitely not the weight where your body wants to be.
Yeah, I think that's I've done, say, cuts and stuff like that, and one thing I do have to remind myself is it wasn't fun. It's great for the photo shoot, great, I have some great photos after, but like I couldn't wait to start eating and being able to do stuff again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, we can romanticize, I think, when we look back at previous weights and think that was ideal. But when we dig a little deeper and look at how we felt maybe around that time, and even when we have, that whole saying, like, you wish you were the size you were when you thought you were fat.
Yeah.
And you look back to the weight you were at 30 or the weight you were at 20. And actually, if I was to look back at 20-year-old me, like 20-year-old me was much smaller than what I am now as a 44-year-old. But I was very unhappy in my body, so a size 8, and thought I was fat, at a size 8. So I think often, like, how we feel about our bodies is actually nothing to do with the size of our bodies. It's just more about our thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, I actually remember a time I put up the photo about it before, that I lost a lot of weight around the time I was 20, and I thought, finally I'm skinny, I distinctly remember that. And then I saw a picture of it recently and I was like, oh my God, that was not good.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy sometimes whenever we look back at those things and just thinking like how anxious or how insecure we actually were about our bodies, and at a time when actually they were really small.
Yeah, it was not a good time in my life either. So as soon as I started eating properly again, it all came back on.
Yeah, as it tends to do.
Yeah. So what kind of, say, tools do you have that you would work with people when they are kind of having these like working through these issues?
It depends, I guess, on each kind of individual client and like where their issues might lie. So like often where I will start is more with the kind of nutritional rehabilitation stuff. So if a client is like severely under eating, or that their eating is like really ad hoc, really chaotic, skipping meals, all of the time, that where we often just begin with is how can we bring in some kind of structure and some kind of consistency to eating without it becoming like a prescriptive meal plan or without it becoming like a new diet. That often the focus is just on bringing in balanced meals, regular eating, and really trying to help like stabilize blood sugars, ensuring the clients are getting enough kind of stable energy throughout the day, and ensuring that they're eating enough kind of for their body's needs to try and minimize those, like for example, if binge eating is happening, and trying to bring in kind of that stable release of energy and trying to minimize the urges to binge. That's usually kind of where the early sessions and the initial work will begin, and then we kind of explore more like the mental and emotional issues that they have. So with anybody that has disordered eating, they will have really like a really strong, powerful inner critic in their mind, and they will probably have loads of rules around food, and will often engage in kind of that extreme thinking, that black and white thinking. So, if they have one thing that they deem to be unhealthy, they feel like they've blown it, they feel like they're a failure, and then they maybe end up just eating a whole load more foods. So we really kind of work at looking at like, what is that inner critic telling them, what irrational thoughts are coming up all the time, and how it's impacting them emotionally. So we really kind of try and work on how do we tame that inner critic in their mind? How do we bring in more compassion, more understanding for self? And how do we, I guess, learn to have an identity and fulfillment and joy and pleasure and all of these things in life outside of their eating disorder? Because quite often when someone has an eating disorder, it preoccupies so much of their time, so much of their energy, so much of their headspace. Like, how do we find meaning in and joy and pleasure in life outside of that? How do we build up self-esteem and and so much stuff outside of the eating disorder? I am a CBT therapist, so often like my work will be looking at that, helping them manage their unhelpful thinking and their emotions. But for a lot of clients, maybe there is a lot of deeper issues that need kind of focused on, need addressed, such as maybe past traumas and things. So there will be elements with some clients as well, just helping them to kind of navigate and manage perhaps past traumas that they've had in their life as well. So it will very much be kind of tailored to each individual and whatever it is that they're kind of presenting. And the ultimate with every client that I work with, and it maybe sounds a little bit corny or a little bit really, is that they will be so hard on themselves, so critical of themselves, that throughout the time that they're working with me, it's how can they develop compassion for themselves? Because the more they criticize themselves, the more they berate themselves, the more they judge themselves, it's just taking them straight back into the eating disorder. So how can they foster compassion and understanding and empathy for themselves throughout, so that when they do have binges or slip-ups or setbacks, that they can, I guess, not engage in those destructive behaviors. They can have some kind of compassion towards themselves, and they can pick themselves up, take the learning from those experiences, and then move forward. And that is often like at the core of recovery around eating disorders, is like becoming more compassionate towards themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I suppose when they come to you, they've already kind of identified they have some disordered eating issues, but do you find that they get surprised about maybe other things that they're doing that could be adding to it, or reasons they might be doing it?
Yeah, and I think like what will often come up a lot of the time is just how much like an eating disorder will try and compensate and negotiate, a lot of the time as well. So if, for example, I'm working with a client on trying to increase just how much energy they're eating during the day, all of a sudden this new behavior will come up, which that they might start exercising more. Increasing that. So it's almost like the eating disorder is always trying to be in control. And so when one area changes, there's some kind of like subtle compensation might go on in another area. But yeah, there's always so many aspects to it. It's never, I mean, when someone comes for help, they'll often just feel like the issue is about food and their inability to control or manage food, or their lack of willpower around food. What often will transpire is that an eating disorder has got very little to do with food and more to do with our thoughts and our emotions. So that can be really insightful for someone coming for help, because they often just think it's to do with their that they're weak-willed, or that there must be something wrong with them, and actually realizing there's so many aspects to this that's not that simple and not that straightforward.
Yeah. You feel bad when you see people saying that, like, no, they're just no willpower, or
and they're blaming themselves. That's the thing that can really I think frustrate me about the whole kind of diet culture, is that they're made to feel perhaps like it's their fault. They've maybe been given a plan that's totally unrealistic, or that it's incredibly low calories, that's not sustainable for any adult human being. And then inevitably, when they either end up binging or they end up regaining the weight, that they're blaming themselves and putting it down to being something to do with willpower, when actually willpower has nothing to do with it. That's just biology. If you're severely under eating, your body's going to, react in some way. Your body's going to respond. And your body's going to respond either by looking for lots and lots of food because it's been deprived, or it's going to respond in trying to conserve whatever energy you do give it and store it and hold on to it. And that's not a willpower issue. So it can be really hard to watch people really, really struggle with that and blame themselves when it's not their fault at all.
Yeah, no, I see that a lot as well, because obviously I'm a personal trainer, and you see all these programs, the transformation programs, and it's at the end of it, you see people going back to them being like, well, it worked before, and it's like, technically it didn't if you have to do it again.
Yeah, and those, like with those before and after pictures as well, there's that, like, we have to remember that the after picture was taken after a period of maybe intense exercise, restriction, control. And well, what about the after?
Yeah, you never see one 6 months after, do you?
You never ever see a photo of that person 6 months after, a year after, or 2 years after, because I would bet money on it that they don't look the same. Yeah, so it's a shame, because like it's those before and after pictures that will maybe pull people in to buying programs or to signing up to things, and actually we want something that's going to help us for the long term and sustain us for the long term, and that's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, one thing I see as well with those before and afters, a lot of the time, do you ever notice, like in the before, they're all sad and they're slouched over and they're pushing out their stomach, and the after, it's like tan, standing up, happy, and you're like, can I see you in the actual same position twice, and let's see.
Yeah. So then they've got the worst underwear on in the first photo, and they've got the best gear on in the second photo.
It's like, look how happy I am now, but are you?
Yeah, really, you're very hangry, aren't you, in reality?
You're about to slap whoever taking the photo if they don't give you something soon.
Yeah, absolutely. If only we could see beyond that.
Have you seen a rise in disordered eating, or is it more people are more aware of it now, do you think?
There's definitely been a rise in it as a result of the pandemic. I definitely noticed, like, I got a lot more inquiries for kind of like university students around that time, because what they found was they had been so excited about going to university, and then either they ended up just having to stay at home and all their studies were done online, or there was a lot of students that actually had gone over to halls and then the pandemic had hit and they ended up just being stuck in their halls, in their rooms, away from their family, away from their friends, and having to kind of complete their courses online. So definitely kind of from that population, we've seen like a real increase in inquiries, but also just in general, I think in general as a whole, the pandemic had a huge impact on people, and this includes myself as well, like the being at home for such a long period of time, gyms being closed, not having our usual outlets, being able to socialize, see people, move our bodies in the same way that a lot of people then kind of struggled with, maybe either just gaining weight and feeling really unhappy about that, or just that during the pandemic, because there was so much stress, uncertainty and anxiety, that they maybe started turning to food for emotional comfort, and then that just became like a much bigger issue. And then they've recognized now, as the world has started to open up again and people have started to kind of integrate back into working in offices or more hybrid working practices, that they've realized actually this has become an issue here, and I need to get help for this. And I think that was anxiety provoking, I think, for a lot of people who spent maybe 2 years at home in sweatpants and things, then even just like, how do I get back into the workforce and, you know, showing up for myself, and really struggling with, I guess, a loss of confidence around just the change that there's been in themselves and the change in their bodies.
Yeah, that was almost like a internet meme in a sense, isn't it? Like the pandemic weight gain or the pandemic 20 or whatever, like that.
It's very real, like very real. I experienced it, you know, myself. My weight definitely changed throughout the pandemic, and I think that is very normal for a lot of people. And we all, like, I got very comfortable in my sweatpants, not seeing people. I got really comfortable with that. And then when people started socializing again and I'd get asked out to socialize, I'd almost get a bit anxious about, like, what? Like going out? I'm not sure about that. So I think it has been very real for people, hasn't it?
Yeah. I got that as well. I got really comfortable. People were like, oh my God, I can't wait for this to be over. And I was like, I get up, but like I kept myself getting up early so I didn't get in too bad of a routine. But I get up, I roll out of bed to my bedroom gym.
Yeah.
I'll probably have a nap in the middle of the day.
Yeah, I got quite comfy with that. And I think like the exercise thing, like there was people in my gym who were quite, you know, they adapted quite nicely to like working out from home. I just could not get into it. Could not get into, couldn't get motivated, couldn't get into the headspace, because like my gym for me is actually hugely about social connection. I go to an all-female gym, it's small group training, and there's no mirrors, there's no big focus on body image. It's about, you know, just connecting with other women, having fun, and building strength and feeling good. So I really missed that, and nothing online appealed to me at all. And that was something I really struggled with, even just like from a mental health perspective, that I was used to moving my body and wasn't then for such a long period of time. So, and that really impacted me. So it's, you know, I think that's where a lot of people, you know, perhaps the pandemic did really affect them. Not just physically, not just from a weight perspective, but even just like mentally as well.
Yeah, no, I noticed that as well. Like, so we did online classes for the gym while it was closed, and you know, at the start of the pandemic, everyone was coming to them.
Yeah.
And then as it went on, like they just kept dropping off, and you're like, okay, I can kind of understand why. It's not the same. It's not you don't have the chats over Zoom like you do in the gym.
Yeah, very, very different. I think particularly in kind of that second wave when we went into lockdown again, it was winter then. I think when we first went into lockdown, the sun was shining, so you could go out for a walk or you could do something in the garden. And I think in that second wave, when it was winter time, it just became so much harder, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, definitely. Do people realize actually the impact exercise can be, like, as in it's it can be a sign of disordered eating as well, over exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people can have like either like a really love or hate sort of relationship with exercise. So I might get like some clients where like the exercise is absolutely used as a coping mechanism. And even when I'm maybe like working with them to try and increase the amount of food they're eating and the energy that they're consuming, that they'll be quite that they'll be okay with that, and they'll appear to be, oh yeah, I'm fine with that, that's okay, and that'll appear to be fine. But what actually is subtly then going on in the background is that they know almost that they've got this buffer of, well, it's okay if I eat a little bit more energy because I've got the exercise to compensate, or I can train a little bit harder. So definitely exercise is absolutely used as kind of like a compensation. And then for other clients that I work with, there may be a real hate relationship with exercise, because maybe they associate exercise just solely with weight loss, or they have, fear, genuine fear or anxiety about going into a gym, particularly if they are in a larger body, for fear of judgment from other people, that other people are going to stare, or what other people might think of them, and they may have real negative experiences around exercise. Like, I know one thing for me, like, I love exercise now, and it's a part of my regular kind of routine, but I know there's a little part in me, that little kind of inner child, that remembers coming last in sports day. I can remember being in the wheelbarrow race and not even finishing the wheelbarrow race. So I do have those negative, and I was larger whenever I was a child. So I do have that sort of, that little inner kind of, the inner fat girl is kind of still in there in my mind. And I think a lot of people who have had struggles with weight and have a real poor relationship with exercise will often have that little kind of inner girl in there as well, who's maybe had bad experiences in school, sports days, not being picked for team sports, and that in itself can create a real aversion to exercise. And often with clients like that, I'm really trying to work with them, like, how do we find a way of moving your body that works with you, that is fun, that you can enjoy, that you can imagine yourself doing, and it doesn't have to be beasting yourself in the gym. Like, movement can take lots of different forms. Like, I have one client that does glow fit. And so it's like, she goes to, it's in a church hall and it's in the dark, and she takes glow sticks and it's like a rave.
That's class.
I'm like, that is brilliant. I want to go to that, because like, she's having fun. And also just the fact that there's no mirrors and it's dark, that she can just let herself go, have fun, move her body. And she feels brilliant, after she's done it. So I think we need to kind of reframe how we see. I tend to use the word movement more than exercise, because I think exercise has negative connotations to it. Like, how can we reframe how we see movement, and how can we factor it into our daily life, but in ways that we enjoy?
Yeah, no, it's good the way you say the word movement, actually, because I do think people do, in a sense, fear exercise, or they feel like they have to go running loads, or they have to go into a gym. And like you said, in the large body, especially in the bigger commercial gyms, it can be very intimidating.
Oh yeah.
But even if, I think, in general, I think women find it very intimidating, even if they're not in a larger body. So say if you are going to go to a gym, maybe go to a small gym that just does group classes like what you're doing, or where I work, where everyone is normal.
Yeah, and there's so many, and that I suppose is the beauty of nowadays, that there are so many different types of gyms and places that you can go. Like, and so I specifically sought out a female only gym. I specifically sought out small group training. I love the fact that there's no mirrors, in my gym, and that really, really works for me. I know if I just went to like maybe a commercial gym on my own, I would probably just faff around. I would faff around. I would maybe feel intimidated about like the weights area or the big men lifting the big heavy weights. Probably that wouldn't be the best environment for me. So I think, that's the beauty now, that there's so much choice out there that you can really explore and find like what place really fits with me and works for me.
Yeah, exactly. And because you're saying movement, it doesn't mean you have to go to gym. It could be that glow fit class, or it could be going walking with your friend, it could be golfing, it could be anything. Like, and think people forget that in a sense. Like, it has to be, being whipped on a gym floor by someone.
Right. I think like walking for me is like the most underrated exercise. Like people don't even think about it when they think of exercise. And I think it's one of the most underrated exercise. And I think it's so good, not just physically and cardiovascular, but even just for mental health. Walking for me is number one.
It's just because it's almost too easy, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's, you can start small and you can build on it. I love for me, walking is my time where I throw like an audiobook on or a podcast on, and I'm very lucky to live quite close to the sea, and just walking down by the sea and like that for me makes such a difference to my kind of mental state. And I think, for anybody, I'm always encouraging, like, it doesn't matter if it's only 10 minutes, just getting some fresh air, getting out, getting a walking can make all the difference to your day.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. I do love going out for a little, we call it wombling, me and my boyfriend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you like any kind of advice to anyone who maybe considers that they might have some disordered eating patterns but are holding back on going and seeing someone? Or
I think with anything, is just like, try not to judge yourself. If you're struggling with this, maybe just get a little bit curious about what might be going on for you, and get curious about what behaviors might you be engaging in that could be kind of keeping you stuck. So are you over exercising? Are you skipping meals? Are you replacing meals with drinks and things instead? Just get really curious about what might be going on for you there. And also kind of having a look at what things might be influencing those behaviors. So are you in a gym, for example, that's really actively encouraging those sorts of things? Do you need to maybe take a break from that gym for a while? Or are you following influencers? Are you following some kind of a plan, an influencer plan or a dietary plan or something? And might that actually be like a real contributing factor? And things like even looking at what things are influencing you, like social media. Are you getting really influenced by certain social media accounts? You might be following certain accounts for inspiration, but they actually might be doing the opposite. They might be making you feel guilty. They might be making you feel worse about yourself. So maybe just kind of get reflective, get curious, and have a look at what are all these behaviors that I'm engaging in? And are any of these behaviors perhaps causing me more harm than they are good? And can I just experiment and get curious of letting go of maybe some of these behaviors, challenging myself to let go of some of these behaviors? Another one might be weighing yourself on the scales. Are you jumping on the scales every day, for example? And what's the impact of how that's making you feel every time you get on the scales every day? How harmful is that perhaps being to you? And can I experiment perhaps with reducing some of these behaviors, challenging myself to let go of some of these behaviors? You can, obviously, if you don't feel like seeing someone one-to-one or going for therapy is what you would like to do, even just exploring maybe some literature around it, getting some good books that are specific around the issue that you might be struggling with, really educating yourself around that. And then, from a social media perspective, social media, I think, is yours to curate in a way that works for you. So if you've been following maybe a lot of Fitspo type things, and actually that might be harmful to you? What if you were to seek out like recovery accounts or like intuitive eating accounts or things like that? Because it can be really helpful to even say, oh my goodness, like that person has had the same issues with me, but they've worked through it, and they're sharing advice and tips and strategies and things. So even just immersing yourself in that kind of recovery space in itself might be very helpful. Podcasts can be very helpful. Audiobooks can be very helpful. So I think there's a lot of things out there now, as long as we seek them out and we find them and we kind of just screen them. First of all, there's a lot of things out there that can be quite helpful just at that starting point of really trying to explore, is this an issue for me here? And educating yourself and getting more understanding. And then you may then want to say, is this something that I need support with, or is this something that I might be able to work through? And that is very much kind of dependent on the individual. Some people will find that actually using self-help resources, doing reflective work, that might be enough to really help them make shifts. For other people, it just might be more serious, it might be more deeply ingrained, and that's when I would really recommend that you might want to then seek more professional help for that.
Yeah. Do you think one of the hardest parts of it is admitting that you actually do have, I can't say a problem, but kind of issues around it?
Yeah, I think it can be really difficult to do, and even coming and asking for help with something can be really difficult to do, because it's you're vulnerable, aren't you? Particularly if it's not something you've done before, you're putting yourself in quite a vulnerable position. Might feel quite exposing. It can feel, particularly with eating disorders, it can feel very shameful. That people might be engaging in behaviours that they don't tell anybody else about, and then they're coming to a therapist to disclose these things. So that can be really anxiety provoking and can bring up a lot. But so much shame is attached to disordered eating that actually speaking about it is the thing that then reduces the shame around it. So it's really then essential in being able to recover.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, I think that is pretty much everything I have to ask you. However, I do ask everyone who comes on the podcast this question, and it is, what is the best advice you've ever been given?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you can pick more than one as well. I always do say that. You can pick more than one.
I'm trying to think of like real life-changing advice. Actually, this is something that's just come to mind. I remember, because like I would have been in the throat, even though like my eating disorder was back in my late teens and early 20s, but I still went through, even though I'd kind of recovered from an eating disorder, I still went through years of constantly pursuing weight loss and trying all the latest fads and crazes. And like I did nutrition training, and I know when I did nutrition training, I went completely down a rabbit hole of like becoming obsessive about everything having to be organic and cooked from scratch, and drinking shots of apple cider vinegar, and I went proper down like rabbit holes, and watching all of the documentaries about veganism, and and completely took over. And I remember like chatting with a PT that I was working with at the time about it, and I love to like have all my knowledge about all the latest research around whatever this health thing was. And I remember having a conversation with him, because I was talking about the risk of eating red meat and cancer, and I was not going to eat red meat, and I didn't want to have cancer and all of this kind of stuff. And he had a conversation with me about context, about everything in life will have context to it. And actually there's a difference between someone, consuming red meat morning, noon and night, smoking cigarettes, drinking lots of alcohol, not engaging in exercise, versus the context someone eating red meat as part of a balanced, nutritious diet, engaging in health promoting behaviors, getting good sleep, having good mental health, managing their stress. And that really stuck with me, that everything in life has context, and that often when we struggle with things, whether it be food or whatever in life, often we tend to polarize things, and we tend to go to extremes with things. So anytime I'm working with clients, or even just for myself, it's very easy for us to read information, to see something and go down rabbit holes, whether it's like a news article that comes up on our news feed. We read about something and we're down a rabbit hole and we take it as absolute and as gospel, and that's right. And I am always trying to think about, well, what's the context behind this? What's the bigger picture in this? Because with anything that we see, with anything we read, with anything we hear, there's often more to it than what meets the eye. There's often reasons behind why one thing has happened or why a person has done a certain thing. So for me, it's always about trying to kind of like take a step back from something, consider the bigger picture, and putting like that one situation, that article, whatever it is, in a bigger context.
That is really good. That is brilliant, actually.
It was very long-winded.
No. I really like that, because it's true. And the way you're saying that as well about, like, you know, not having red meat and things, people do get very, very like that when it comes to food. They read something and they're like, that's it, not having a rasher for the rest of my life, I'll get cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, he really did challenge me on that, because I would have absolutely been sitting in a camp of, oh my God, you eat red meat, you're like, it's a guarantee that you're going to get cancer. But the context around it is actually, there are so many other factors that will come into play about a person eating red meat, their stress, their lifestyle, like so many other things that are going to have an influence over that. So that was really helpful for me.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's brilliant. And I think we need to be reminded it from time to time as well.
Yeah, and particularly in kind of that health and wellness space, we do get far too polarized.
Oh yeah.
Far too polarized about things, and we hear something might be good for our health, so we just assume, oh well, if I eat this, that's brilliant, that's really healthy, so if I eat that food, then I'm going to be really unhealthy. And you know, like, health is so much more than just like these individual food items that we eat. Like in the context of health is much more complex than that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so true. And yeah, it does get very polarized in the fitness industry. It's a nightmare. Okay, so I just want to say thanks for joining us today. But also, before you go, Claire, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, is where I probably hang out a lot of the time. My handle is @Eatology UK, or my website is www.eatology.co.uk.
Brilliant. And as ever, guys, you can find me on Instagram's Chrissy H Fitness, and then you'll also find me on www.chrissyhawkins.com. And then if any horsey people are about, I'm on Instagram and TikTok @StrongInTheSaddle. With Instagram, there's an underscore. With TikTok, there's no underscore at the end. Well, yeah, so just want to say thanks again for joining us today, Claire.
Thank you for having me.
I really do appreciate everybody who listens to this podcast. So if you please could help me with the algorithm and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And even, you know, if you want to reach out and suggest topics for me, I'd be delighted to hear from you. Drop me a DM on Instagram or TikTok. And thanks again for listening. Hi guys, welcome back to Why Not, an interview today with a psychotherapist, Claire Feldman, who deals specifically with disordered eating. So we talk a little bit about some of the things that come up with disordered eating, how it's not always just a case of not having enough willpower. We talk about other things like trauma that can cause it, how exercise can actually be a part of it, how she came into working in this realm as well. And yeah, and some really interesting advice at the end as well, I think, which is really, really good. So definitely worth listening to for that as well. So guys, hope you enjoyed this episode.